Hello, and welcome back to my channel where we make life happen for us instead of to us, and I talk about how we can do that. And today I want to talk about how one of the best ways that we can make life happen for us is to attune our brain to get what we want. And we attune our brains to get what we want by focusing on what we want. And we can focus on what we want or desire through things like repetition, visualization, and thought redirection. But the long and short of it is, we want to be thinking about what we want so much. We want it embedded in our brain so much that our brain becomes attuned to any opportunity that can help us get there. And I'll explain what I mean by that so it'll make more sense. So one of the YouTubers I watch, I don't remember her name right now. I will put it on the screen. But she regularly said in her videos that when it comes to making life happen for you, you have to know what you want like you know your name. And I never understood that. Like she would say, I know it like I know my name. And I'm like, I don't get it. And stay with me here because this is related to what I'm talking about attuning your brain. So now what helped me understand what she meant was when I was watching a recent video by Jessie Riemann, and she talked about how when you are very heavily focused on what you want, you attune your brain to it. Just like how when you're in a crowded room, if someone yells your name, if someone even just says your name, they don't have to yell it. If they even say your name, you are already like your ears start perking up, you start looking around, and you're already alert, right? As soon as you hear your name, just immediately. And why does that happen? It's because your brain is attuned to your name, right? Like the same way you know your name so much that you can always respond to it immediately or perk up when you hear it is the same way that you want to be familiar with what you want. And when you become that familiar with what you want, your brain knows what you want like it knows your name, right? And it'll start to perk up anytime it sees any opportunity that'll help you get to what you want. It'll start to notice opportunities and like make connections. Anytime it notices that your desire's name is being called. So how do we become that familiar with what we want? Like so much so that we know it like we know our name. Well, as I mentioned, some of the best ways to do this is through repetition, visualization, and thought redirection. You don't have to do them in that order, but I'm just gonna start with repetition because I just mentioned it. You also don't have to do all of these things. You do whatever works for you, but I would recommend doing all of these things. Okay, so to start with repetition. Now, the more we repeat something, the more it sticks in our brain, right? This is why that, let's say when we're studying for a test, we review the information over and over because the more that we review it, the more that we'll remember it and it'll stick in our brain, right? Even things like, does anyone else remember like the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell? Like we don't need that information now, but we still remember it, right? Because of repetition. And even other things that we're not trying to remember. Like if I'm buying things online and I'm constantly putting in my card information, eventually I'm going to remember what the card number is and all the details on the card without looking at it. Why? Because I've had to look at it so much. It's become so repetitive that it's just in my brain. So, in terms of getting familiar with what we want, repetition is very powerful. And it's powerful because even if what we want isn't true, or isn't our situation right now, let's say, it doesn't matter because our brain will believe it anyway. And this is because, we're telling it the same thing over and over. And our brains the way our brains work, when we hear something over and over, we start to believe that it's true. And since our brains like to ensure that what we believe matches what we see, we will end up either consciously or unconsciously bring about the thing that we want to happen. Which is why like phenomenons like this self-fulfilling prophecy exists, right? It's not that the thing was true and then we believed it. We believed something to be true and then it became true because of us, right? Like I don't know, if I'm walking outside and I'm a type of person who sometimes get anxious, okay? But if I'm walking outside and I think like, "Oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me." Um Eventually, by me thinking that and thinking it so deeply and repeating it to myself, eventually people may end up looking at me, right? I may give them something to look at. I may trip over something. I may start walking weird because I'm so self conscious, right? Um, and it's not that people were always looking at me before, but again, I gave them something to look at, right? Because your brain brings about what it believes is true. So, um, some ways to repeat what we want to ourselves is yes, sing it to ourselves over and over, but we can do this in different ways, right? Like we don't have to just say it. We can sing it. We can listen to it. We can read it. We can write it. However you want to do it. But the point is that doing it over and over will help our brain to get familiar with and attune to what we want. Now, the next way, and very powerful way to get our brains familiar with what we want is through visualization, and particularly visualization with feeling and with our senses. Because when we feel something, our brain pays more attention to it. Because if something is invoking an emotion, clearly that means that it's important enough that we need to pay attention to it, which is especially why like negative experiences tend to stand out to us, but also positive ones too, because there's an emotion there that is saying to the brain that this is when an emotion happens, it's saying to the brain that the brain notices it and says, okay, this is important. Like this is important enough that things are happening in your body, and I need to pay attention to it. So when we visualize something, we want to visualize what we want, but especially with feeling, right? This is something that I've been learning. And when we are visualizing with feeling, I've been learning that we are preparing ourselves in advance for us getting it. And by preparing for us having it, our brain gets really familiar with what we want or what we're expecting, and thus starts to attune to what we want. And I think this is best explained by a Bible verse. So if you're not religious, please just stay with me. I'm not preaching at you or anything. But I think you'll find this metaphor as interesting as I did. So now I got this because of Neville Goddard's teachings. Neville Goddard is in the manifestation community very, very popular. His teachings are very popular. And he used a Bible verse to describe this as a metaphor. Um, so this is John 14, verses 1 to 3, and Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." Now, what Neville is saying here is that this is a metaphor specifically for this type of thing. The Father's house is actually our minds. The many mansions or many rooms are they're like the different spaces we can create in. Because like our minds are infinite and there's a lot of rooms in our minds. Okay? Um, but what Neville is saying here is that Jesus is saying, when he's saying, I go to prepare a place for you, That is us. We are Jesus in that sense of going to prepare a place. When we visualize what we want and we visualize it with feeling, it's like we're going to it's like we're going and preparing for it, right? Now, when we open our eyes, we're back here. But since we prepared a place and, we made an emotional connection with it and everything, our brain will remember it, right? And it'll bring us back to that point. Like when Jesus is saying, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, ye may be also, because we've prepared a place, right, and our brain remembers it. Our brain will bring us back to that place that we prepared. So this is why I said, even if you're not religious, the way Neville talks about this is very interesting. um, so now that we understand why visualization is so powerful, let's talk about how we do it. So the way Neville talks about this, and it's not just Neville, a lot of people, when it comes to like manifestation and brain hacking, a lot of people talk about this. And they talk about thinking or visualizing about the end state. And the end state here is you having the thing that you want. So, not like how you will get what you want, but what it would be like to have, like the thing that you wanted happened, and you're thinking about what it's like to have that thing. And I think that these people, Neville and all these people, they don't really talk about the how, because I think it gets your brain to be open enough to notice any and all opportunities that can help you to get to what you want. Um, like, let's say if you want to make a certain amount of money, right? But you keep thinking about or visualizing making this money doing a particular job, then your brain's only going to think in that route, right? As opposed to you just thinking about what it would be like to have the money that you want, and what it would be like to feel like to have that money. Then your brain can start to make other connections to help you get there. And you never know. Maybe you end up starting a business, or doing something, I don't know, maybe creating like a product or something, and it ends up getting you that money a lot quicker than if you would have gone the other route. Okay, so how do we visualize? Now, if we are following Neville's way, we are going to imagine scenes, and these are short scenes, like literally a few seconds. We're going to imagine scenes of what would happen after we get the thing that we want, right? Like right after we get the thing that we want, what might happen? And we want to imagine this in first person view, because that will help our brain feel like it's happening now or it happened already. And that's important because a lot of times our brains and our bodies can't decipher well between reality and the things that we're imagining. So if we imagine a scene happening in first person, it helps our brain think that it's happening now, and it'll solidify in our subconscious and help our brain get familiar with it, and or want to bring it about, because our brain always wants to prove that what it believes is right. And our brain, always wants to prove that, not prove, but it wants to keep the same things happening that are already happening. And our brains will believe anything that we show it and anything that we tell it. And what I mean here by our bodies can't decipher between reality and the things that we're imagining is this. So I don't know if you're weird like me, but sometimes I will be just sitting there and then I will start to imagine, I don't know, like having an argument, or something just really sad happening. And then I'll start to feel either angry or I'll start to feel sad. Like I will literally start to feel these things, and I'll even like make up my face, and then I'll have to stop and be like, oh, that didn't actually happen. Right? Like that's what I mean by your body can't really decipher between what's real and what's imagined. You just feel it anyway. It's real to you. You imagining it, it's real to you, whether it's imagined or happening. It's the same thing. Okay, so now to go back to visualization and give an example of this. Let's say that we want to move into a new place. Now, what we want to think about is after we move into the new place, we moved into the new place, what might happen? Like right after we've moved into the new place, what are some things that, we might do? Or some things that might happen. So we might get congratulated from like friends or family, right? So we can imagine that. Um, we can imagine us like literally moving in and unpacking, or like putting boxes down. We might imagine cleaning our new place, right? Or inviting friends over. And then we also want to think about how it would make us feel to be in that new place. So we might feel safe or relaxed or relieved, right? And I think it's especially important, as I said, to imagine scenes that invoke a feeling. So if it would make you more happy for a specific person to congratulate you, then you want to imagine them saying that to you, right? Like you just want to imagine scenes that invoke a feeling. And this also doesn't have to be like a visual visualization. In fact, it's best if we can use all of our senses because it'll really put us in the moment, right? So even if you can't see in your mind's eye, that's fine. But like, can you imagine hearing things? Can you imagine feeling things, tasting things? Can you imagine what it's like to smell or touch the thing, right? Like, really engross yourself as much as possible into the visualization. Now, the thing here is that the repetition thing I mentioned doesn't just go away, right? It is very powerful when we can combine both repetition and visualization together. So, what this would look like is visualizing, one of those short scenes and repeating that a few times. Or maybe like repeating it in our minds multiple times a day. Maybe not like one after the other in succession, but it could be like multiple times a day. Could be in the morning or at night, morning, noon, and night, what have you. But the point is, doing it multiple times a day will really help bake it into our brain and help attune our brain to what we want. And if we're truly doing this Neville's way, right, he talks about doing this in a sleepy state. So this could be, to some people, this is described as like meditative or hypnotic or literally just like a drowsy state, like right before you go to sleep. And this is because when we are drowsy, we are more relaxed, right? And it's easier for our brain to accept the things that we tell it. Like it's not arguing with us to tell us, oh, this is not true, or oh, this is not happening. It's easier for our brain. Our guards are down when we're drowsy, so it's easier for our brain to accept information. Which is why it is recommended to visualize in a drowsy state. So the more that we do that, the more that our brain is attuning to what we want. And then it can know what we want like we know our name. Okay, so the last way that I mentioned that we could become familiar with what we want or attune our brain to what we want is through what I call thought redirection, right? And this simply means that if we have any thoughts or daydreams contrary to what we want to stop ourselves and focus back on what we want. So let's go back to the house example. If we want to live in a new house, but then throughout the day, we're seeing things here and there, and we're like, we start to think like, oh, like I'll never be able to get into this new place. It's gonna be too hard. It's gonna be too costly. I can't because of this and that. Mm-mm. Stop ourselves, right? And refocus back on the house. We want a new house. We want to be in a new place. So we focus on what it's like to be in that new place, right? So instead of us daydreaming that, like, we'll never get it or that we're struggling to find the money, we daydream about what we want instead, which is us living in the new house. Like, we're already spending energy to uh, think about things in a negative way. How about we try and flip it and think about things in a more positive way, right? Um, and I did mention this in a previous video, but like it's going to be hard for us to get what we want if we're not consistently focused on it. So if I'm driving and I want to go straight, that's what I want. I want to go straight, but I keep looking to the right. Eventually, I'm going to go to the right because that's where I'm focused. If I want to go straight, I need to look straight. I need to focus straight, right? It's the same thing here. Sometimes we are going to end up thinking in another direction, and that's okay. That's human. But this is why when that happens, we just need to redirect our thoughts back to what we want. And the more we do that, again, as I mentioned, the more our brain will attune to what we want. And the more we're doing this, the more our brain is literally creating new neural pathways to that type of thinking. Um, and this is why for a lot of us, like we're prone to negative thinking. At least I am, right? Like if we keep thinking something over and over, it's like we're creating tracks, like train tracks in our brain towards that thing. And the more we think of it, the quicker and quicker that train of thinking will go until, it's as fast as like a bullet train. Like we can just get there, make those associations very easily to get to that train of thought or to get to feeling a particular thing or a particular state of mind. But the thing is that our brain is malleable, right? So even if we've already created really well-defined tracks in one direction, we can create tracks and pathways in another. Um, and the more that we redirect our brain and our thinking to focus back on what we want, the more well defined that track in our brain will be. And the quicker our brain will get to thinking in that manner, and the more attuned our brain will be able to get to thinking about what we want and to get to what we want. And when our brain is attuned, it'll know what we want, like we know our name. So anytime any sort of opportunity comes up that may help us to get to what we want, it'll perk up, right? And it'll notice it because there is such a deep, well-defined connection with what we want. So to summarize everything and bring it all together, one of the best ways to make life happen for us is to attune our brain to what we want. So much so that it recognizes what we want, like how we recognize our name. And we can do this through things like repetition, visualization, with feeling and with our senses, and with thought redirection. So, I hope this video gave you some very helpful and actionable information. If it did, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you're thinking. I actually spoke with one of my sisters about this the other day. She was feeling very uncertain. She was just feeling things, and I spoke with her literally about this. And she found it really helpful, and she's like, you have to create a video about this. So I am creating a video about this, and I hope it was as helpful to you as it was to her. I am also planning to create a journal with some prompts related to stuff like this. So pretty much every day I do focused journaling. There's a particular way that my journal looks, and there are particular prompts that I ask myself, and it's all related to this. And I feel like it has really helped me, especially in helping me get to the things that I wanted. And it's still helping me get to the things that I want. So if this sounds interesting to you, sign up to my newsletter. The link is in the description because when the journal is ready for release, you will be notified. I'm also planning to create another community related to stuff like this. So if you're interested, again, you can sign up to the newsletter and you'll be notified when the community is ready. Other than that, if you like this content, you can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And you can like the video. That helps me and helps this channel. You can share this video with other people who you think, like, I don't know, friends and family who you think might be interested in something like this. And again, you can join the newsletter to receive this type of positive content straight to your inbox, because YouTube doesn't always do a good job with notifications like this. Anyway, I think I've said enough. My voice is getting tired. So let me know if there's any other topics that you want to see, or if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Where's my water bottle? If you're still here, y'all, thank you. Um, Full disclosure, I recorded this 3 or 4 times. And I thought I did well until I listened to the audio and you could hear the AC in the background. And so I just recorded this again, hopefully for the last time, because I feel like this is important for y'all to know. I feel like it's helpful. And yeah, I wanted to get the word out. So hopefully this helps. And y'all let me know, at least one of y'all, let me know you like this format. So I'm going to keep doing it. You're going to keep seeing my face and all the different hairstyles that will accompany it. Yeah, anyway, that is it. I'm going to go drink some water. Have a good day. Have a good week. I'll see you next time.